hurricanes are going to keep happening. But what we have seen is that there's a link between the warming waters caused by climate change and the increased intensity of hurricanes when they do happen. So the argument with Hurricane Katrina that this was a climate-related disaster was that it was so intense, it was extraordinarily intense in terms of its impact, and then the relationship to climate change becomes more apparent, that it wasn't any old hurricane. It was unbelievably off the charts intensity-wise, and scientists link that increased intensity to climate change. Then we've got the international dimension. So this is what we've talked about, going from one country to the next, because you cannot stay in your country. So look at this language. This is from the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, very small, low-lying island in the South Pacific. Pretty provocative language. The Prime Minister of Tuvalu is talking about the developed world's failure to adequately regulate climate change. That means us, the US, Europe, Australia, Canada, the inadequacy of our efforts in the developed world to regulate climate change effectively, and that's a fair statement. We've failed miserably. He's referring to that as a slow and insidious form of terrorism against us as the island nations. Do you think that's an overstatement? What do you think about when you hear the word terrorism? Think about climate change? Maybe you do now. Maybe he succeeded in using this language. So this really cuts both ways. Typically when we think of terrorism, we think of post 9/11 realities of ISIS and so forth. But characterizing the failure to act on climate change as terrorism against these vulnerable populations is a very provocative way of putting it. And there's actually scholarly literature coming out on this notion, and it's referred to as slow violence. This inaction. A lot of times we think of terrorism as action. It's violent, it's intentional, hostile action. And it's easy for us to hate that. But indifferent inaction over decades that causes people to die unnecessarily, let's call that terrorism too. I mean, that to me is every bit as easy to hate in terms of you were in a position to do something and you failed to do so out of selfishness and poor judgment, and you're causing island nations to go underwater perhaps 50 to 100 years sooner than they would have. That looks like terrorism to me. I think he's onto something. So pictures are always worth 1,000